The Harlem Renaissance, a period defined by the blossoming of African American culture. This blossoming was evident in the paintings, dances, and poetry that emerged from this era. But music rose above the rest. Throughout the Harlem Renaissance, jazz and blues were only recently getting picked up by African Americans. During this time, jazz and blues were escapes for many to go somewhere and not be harassed for the color of their skin. Over time, however, it became a way for black people to confront white people and show them that they were just as capable and talented as them. Slowly, jazz and blues became a bridge between cultures and strengthened the relationships between all Americans.
During the Harlem Renaissance, music wasn't just seen as sounds and noises. Music was seen as a piece of art. Music was passion and aspirations, but most of all, music was freedom. The Harlem Renaissance was the start of something so great it would be forever remembered throughout history as a peak for jazz. Jazz during the Harlem Renaissance is remembered so vividly today because of the effect it had on the people as well as the culture around it. The Harlem Renaissance was based in the 1920s, and around this time, segregation was a huge part of day-to-day life. African American men and women were not yet treated as equal, but in an effort to free one's mind, many resorted to jazz as an escape from the constant prejudice. At the start of the 20th century, many Black Americans facing racism and discrimination across the country moved to a neighborhood in the Upper Manhattan, Harlem. This neighborhood soon became a cultural center in the early 1920s. As the years progressed, though, jazz had seeped into the bodies and minds of everyone. When jazz was played, the color of your skin didn't matter. Everyone was bonded through a simple art and passion. Everyone would share emotions and aspirations through the blues. Jazz wasn't just used as a gateway during the Harlem Renaissance. Jazz empowered those to speak out and utilize their voices. Equality was an aspiration of many. African Americans during the Harlem Renaissance made jazz their motive. Take the Train, published in 1939 by Duke Ellington, was a masterpiece of its time, and as the song aged, it shed light on the newer meaning of Harlem. The song was created as a root for the civil rights movement, and its main target was to express how many African American men and women felt through these harsh and severe times. Civil activists have always done their best to defend the innocent actions of many segregated, but now, through jazz, each and everyone had a voice to be heard. Thank you.
In today's society, when figuring out what people have in common, oftentimes music taste falls into a category. Depending on what kind of music people listen to, it can persuade one to take an immediate liking to someone or leave them with an unsure feeling. Back in the Harlem Renaissance, however, music was an expression of voice and emotion. One of the main genres of this time era was the blues. The blues were very raw and emotional and originated back in cotton plantations. Yes, blues originate from slaves. In these detrimental times for African Americans, the only way they were able to express themselves was through music and poetry. All had a lot to say and all had a lot of pain. Over time, however, once slavery had ended, African Americans had a little bit more freedom with their music. They were able to play in groups without having to worry of getting caught. At this time, blues started becoming more and more popular in bigger cities during the time of the Great Depression. Blues had a unique style that made it different from the rest. Most commonly, there was emphasis beats on the 2 and 4 beats of songs, whereas in modern Western music, there was emphasis put on the 1 and 3 beats. In the midst of all the prejudice against African Americans and in the midst of all the lynchings taking place, a song was written. A song written by a white male named Abel Meerpool. This song was called Strange Fruit, and it changed the world. Nothing like this was ever talked about in a song or in general. The dark history behind both the song and Billie Holiday gave it power and emotion. People were starting to realize the wrongs they were committing, so much to the point where officials demanded that the song isn't to be sung anymore. Overall, this infuriated a lot of people. Maybe it was shut down because the realization it was causing, or because deep down people knew it was true. Furthermore, it gave people a reason to listen to blues and jazz players and really hear what people had to say. Over time, more people would begin to like the music that was being played, giving the respect to the people playing it. In the end, music was a huge part of the act in American inclusion and really helped to build the bridge between both cultures.
During the Harlem Renaissance, many pathways to success started to show themselves for African Americans, the most notable one being music. Take jazz, for example. Louis Armstrong grew up poor and with split parents in New Orleans. Things changed, however, when one day Armstrong started to develop a love for the cornet in a home for troubled kids, and this love was catalyzed by Joe King Oliver, a local cornet player who showed Armstrong the ropes and passed the torch when he left for Chicago. Armstrong prospered in the Harlem Renaissance due to his mastery of the cornet and improvisational skills in the new, more popular jazz style, as opposed to the more orderly and rigid classical style. This led to him forming a group of all-stars featuring some of the most talented instrumentalists in the world and touring all over the US, Australia, Europe, South America, and Africa, according to American cultural leaders. He also had multiple iconic singles, though most were released after the Harlem Renaissance, such as What a Wonderful World, La Vie en Rose, and St. Louis Blues, featuring acclaimed blues singer Bessie Smith. Another genre that held success for African Americans was blues, a prime example of this being Billie Holiday. Billie Holiday, like Armstrong, also didn't have a great living situation in her adolescence. She was born from a teenage pregnancy in Baltimore, her father left when she was young, it is widely believed that she was raped at the young age of 10, she had to resort to prostitution to support her sick mother, and she had very little education. But music was a way out for her, and she quickly rose to fame by recording singles like Griffin the Scotch and Body and Soul after getting noticed by producer John Hammond. Then, the bombshell. In 1939, Holiday released Strange Fruit, a song about the pain, suffering, and fear lynching inflicted among African Americans all throughout the South, which ignited major controversy among music fans and politicians alike. Sadly, Holiday's rocky childhood had taken its emotional toll on her, leading to constant drug use and her eventual death in 1959, at just the age of 44. Music clearly provided an outlet for these two artists to find success, and while Holiday's ending was far from ideal, music gave them a better life than the one they would have had without it, while also putting the United States on notice and proving the capability of African Americans.
Music such as jazz and blues made African Americans and white Americans become more united during the Harlem Renaissance. Jazz and blues are still influenced and listened to today. Every night, white people took taxis and subways uptown to Harlem to listen and dance to music by black musicians and singers at the Cotton Club and Subway Bath Ballroom. Jazz and blues were an important part of the Harlem Renaissance as they brought African Americans and white Americans more connected to each other, and they were an important part of American culture. In the performance, Sea Jam Blues by Duke Ellington uses a united band with mostly African American guys, but one white American guy trying to show white Americans that white and black people can live together harmoniously, much like how United the Band plays. They learn to grow, have fun, and accept each other. African American life is not only establishing new contacts and founding new centers, it is finding a new soul. There is a fresh spiritual and cultural focusing, an unusual outburst of creative expression. The purpose of African American music was to create a bond with others and have them show their true selves. People changed their lifestyle and learned that what it means to be part of a diverse community, which is to bring all Americans together and thrive. Music helped African Americans and white Americans learn and see more eye to eye in one another.
Wait, where's my hoodie? And my beanie? Much better. In conclusion, jazz and blues have histories far predating the 1920s, but they broke out on a whole new level during the Harlem Renaissance. It was through jazz and blues that African Americans were not only able to prove themselves as just as capable, intelligent, and human as white Americans, but they really started to put the United in United States. Thank you.